Alright, we good? Alright, we good? It's kind of quiet, I guess. Alright, we good? It's kind of quiet, I guess.
Hello, hello. Hello, hello.
What's good, Don?
Hello, hello.
What's good, Don? Yeah, things
Hello,
working.
hello.
What's good, Don? Yeah, things
Hello,
working.
hello.
What's good, Don?
Good, good.
Here now. I was just having my session with possibly the world's worst debate coach. We'll see. Yeah, is my mic working in any reasonable way?
Yeah, I think
You're
we're
very
good.
loud.
Bit loud? Right. I have no idea how to change my volume.
You can go into Discord settings if you need. Or Don can just change it in his, like, by right-clicking.
Yeah,
So
I'm
you just don't have to
changing it.
I'll set it back to how it was before then so you can change it.
Alright, let's announce it real quick, and then we should be good.
Alright, that sounds good.
So is it just the two of us then? No
Yeah.
one else is. Alright. This will be interesting. I suppose there's no need for crossfire and all that formality. I can just interrupt on then, right?
Yeah, we're
Because
kind of gonna do
it'd be
it,
fine.
like, after each question anyway, we have time. Okay, so let's give it a minute or so, and then we can get started.
All right. Any response from mods on my request to be the one who pings everyone? Well, that's very, very saddening.
Alright, so it's 3 o'clock. Guess we can get started. So I'll start with Don, I guess. Let's start off by introducing yourself and expanding a little on your platform.
All right, cool. Hello, lads. I'm Don. I lead the Pirate Party along with my co-leader 14. And I am here on behalf of the Pirate Party because actually no one else from the Pirate Party wanted to do it, so I stepped up. So basically, what my party is really about is just like, despite the accusations that some nefarious individuals have placed towards us, we are actually not pro-violence currently. So, in addition to that, we have a bunch of other stuff that we feel as though it gives us a bit of nuance instead of just being the stereotypical pirates y'all kind of thing. But as in such as we are actually pro exploration, as well as a bunch of other things that you might have to look at into our manifesto in order to get a better view of our party. So yeah, I guess that pretty much introduces us. So.
Thank you for the comments, and then Snitchel, it's your turn.
Yeah, so I am the Honourable First Feline Serwina Schnitzel. I'm the current head of the Guild of Green. Put shortly, we're a religious party whose theology dictates that we've a divine mission of sorts to nurture and grow the ecosystems around us. And from that, by mechanisms which are explained in our own platform, follows some expansionism, a belief in a firm centralized government, and some amount of militarism against those who oppose our other aims. And also, this is a somewhat a vague aim which might not even merit stating. We're not that some other parties oppose it. We strongly support maintaining the democratic ideals and the freedoms outlined in the Constitution. Now, if I could address some of the things Don said, well, first of all, you're the Pirate Party,
Excuse
which is...
Hey,
yes?
you can't do that.
Well,
I call for moderation
What's up?
because the question solely.
Well, are you afraid of being asked
Hey.
questions then, Don?
Well, hey, we'll do crossfire after. I just finish your introduction, and then I'll say we can do crossfire.
Well, I finished mine.
Okay, do you want to do crossfire then? I guess we probably should.
Sure, I will do that. I should probably get on the stream so I can type that in the chat. Right, yeah. So you're the Pirate Party, which is a party with some pedigree, but you don't necessarily have anything to do with either yourselves in your original incarnation, because you've changed, as you've said, your aims currently are a lot different from what they were when you first started, and a lot different from any other pirate party or anything one would associate with piracy. So explain yourself.
We technically Snitchel, we are pirates in RP only, so it doesn't. The essence of a pirate party is not that we are going to necessarily let's see, how do I say this? The essence of the pirate party is that not necessarily that we are going to see this, instill pirate, like stereotypical pirate values into our governmental platform. Instead, we are basically just doing it for RP purposes, role-playing purposes. I frankly don't see the reason why this has to be such a big deal. In addition, our changes in our manifesto, well, some have said they are pretty drastic. Personally, I don't think so. These measures are just measures to make sure that our manifesto is more palatable to the mainstream audiences, especially given that you have Mad Madeline's or Lady Sile, who said that, I believe she said when she joined the Patriot Party that we were too focused on violence, and as well as H-Ken, who before he created the Diabotic Corporation, I actually approached him about joining our party, and he said that we were too lowbrow for his taste. So these changes were not just to radically change it to say that we're not like actual pirates, because we are actual pirates. We are role playing as pirates, but it's just to make sure that we are more palatable to a mainstream audience.
No, I've not seen you doing any role playing, but I suppose being sort of mercantile duplicitous is a legitimately pirate thing, so I'll give you that. How do you feel about the fact that none of your other party members have expressed any interest in showing up to a legislative debate?
Well, that's their problem. It's their life, man.
Well, yes, it doesn't exactly inspire confidence in a governmental body.
It's a legislative debate, okay, man. Like people have their own lives. People have their own things to do,
Okay, do you
and
guys have,
sometimes
like, actual questions?
people like people like 14 and other people, they are kind of they don't want to talk to they don't want to be online. They don't want to talk to other people because maybe they have their own views and stuff. Okay, so
Okay,
like
yeah.
I don't understand why you should attack
Thank you,
this
Snitchel,
kind of thing.
for the questions, but let's get on to some actual policy. So, question number 2: what game settings would your party advocate for? What map type, DLC, difficulty? So, Don first again.
So as for the pirate party, I think we don't really have that many preferences in terms of game settings. I suppose we would support the new barbarian update. And as for the map type, I think we would rather go for we would preferably go for archipelago or maybe continents. I mean, continents is sort of given. Well, Japan already has a preference for a seaside start, so I guess continents as well. DLC, obviously the two main ones. I forget their names. And difficulty, I don't really care about that. I don't think my party really cares about that, as long as it's pretty easy for the PM to play it.
Alright, Snitchel, what about you?
Right. So here the guild's policies aren't entirely set upon. We're relatively flexible in this area, largely because Japan, RP-wise, is a fairly flexible country in terms of what environments you can settle in. We would generally oppose anything monocontinental, like anything where there wouldn't be seafaring, because it's cool. That's something we can throw with the pirates on. For DLC, the two main ones, Gathering Storm and Rise and Fall, in my opinion, those are just shoo-ins. They add a lot to the game. The Vietnam and Kublai Khan pack is perhaps the more controversial addition we would support, because preserves and corporations, particularly given we have a prominent Green Party and a prominent Capitalist Party, we think those would be very interesting meta-wise and especially wordplay-wise for the game.
Alright, thank you for the comments. Do you guys have any crossfire questions or anything you want to expand on?
I have none.
Yeah, I have none here either.
Okay, so I guess if we're done with that question, we can move on to number 3. So, what are your initial plans for the first game session or stream? What would your party like to pass or implement if you had majority power in Parliament? And I think I'll start with Snitchel this time.
Shall you with me now? All right. So our first and largest priority, and this is something we're already working with other parties to accomplish, is we want to accord constitutional power pertaining to the management of faith, both mechanically and RP-wise, to some national religious body. And we have published an outline of this body. It's more complex than I'll go into here, but that's something we would absolutely be supporting. It conforms to our aims, and it conforms to a lot of our allies' aims as well. In terms of in-game stuff, we would focus early on getting out a second or third city, preferably as far away as we can reasonably hope to maintain control of and retain protection over. We would want to found some more cities, and we'd also want to focus on improving the land we have, generally before improving our industrial centers.
All right, thank you for the response. Don, what are your thoughts?
So our initial plans for the first legislature, or really for the first stream, is really just for the first legislature. I think we would want to pass a Bill of Rights. I believe 14 has been writing up that Bill of Rights on his own time, and I feel like this would accomplish our stated goal of trying to be as transparent and as accountable as possible. As far as if what we would like to pass or implement, if we had majority power, as I said, the Bill of Rights, as well as maybe a few other well, there's not really much you can do the first session or stream that could really relate to our seafaring part of the manifesto. So I feel as though the Bill of Rights is pretty much the paramount thing in our first stream. As for in-game, I pretty much agree with Mitchell's arguments in that sense. I mean, it's pretty meta to just try to get for another settler and then try to, get him to or her to a favorable spot, and do that. Preferably, I have to say, as for my own opinion, as well as my compatriots, perhaps a seaside city would be very good, and I believe that would be the best option or way that the Pirate Party thinks that the first session could be.
All right, thank you. Before I open up Crossfire, we do have a question from chat. It says, what rights do the pirates believe every man is entitled to, and like what sort of outline would you say you have for the Bill of Rights?
So as for that, we do. I believe 14 has written up his Bill of Rights. Yes, he has.
Could you
So
share
basically,
a little bit?
yeah. Well, I'm gonna try. So we have basically the right to citizenship and equality to other citizens, the right to freedom of speech and freedom of assembly, obviously the right to hold any religious stance and worship any god, the right to privacy and protection against observation without consent, and the right to political thought and belief, as well as a few others, which we believe are pretty essential for every citizen on under the Japanese banner. Now, I do think that these bill these stances in this Bill of Rights, they do go against some of the other parties' doctrines. For example, the obvious one would be the Disciples of Heaven and the 53 National Movement. But I don't think that these stances have much to hold against the fact that the government has to be transparent, the government has to protect the rights of the citizens, etc., etc. So.
All right, thank you for expanding upon that. I guess we can open up Crossfire now. Is there anything you guys want to ask each other?
Yeah, I would ask Don to explain, because he justified the Bill of Rights before expanding, of course, with the logic that it would promote government transparency without really any mention of personal freedoms, but the justification was government transparency. I would ask him to explain, because I don't think he's done that, how this proposed Bill of Rights, especially since it outlines privacy, would promote transparency.
So, in terms of that, it is citizen privacy, not government privacy. So we believe that if every citizen has the right to their own privacy, every citizen has the right to their own thoughts, and every citizen has the right to not say them to the government, to keep them to themselves, and to not be
Would
forced to
consider
say
members
them
of the
in
government
public.
not to be citizens. Would you not?
Government as a state, as entity, is much different from the individual citizens. Okay, so obviously this is a Bill of Rights about the citizens, not the government.
Well, yes, but is individual citizens who are members of government who we would want to be able to observe and to ensure they're not doing anything nefarious. So,
essentially, could you maybe provide an example of what, kind of an example of what this might entail, as in like a private government official, their privacy rights versus transparency in government?
well, the argument I'm making is that there's not so firm a distinction as Don seems to be drawing.
Do you believe there should be a distinction and less rights for government officials?
No, absolutely not. I believe to an extent that as public employees, they are subject to certain expectations, and measures should be in place to ensure those expectations are met. But absolutely not. I absolutely wouldn't say that they deserve less rights.
So you think that nobody is entitled to the right of privacy?
I haven't
Because
taken
they
that
are
position.
technically employees of the government. You're saying that they are employees of the government, so they are not entitled to the right of privacy. Therefore, everything has to be, public. That's what you're saying.
I
Thoughts
think
have
we're
to be
kind of getting
public.
off track about like what each
That
person
is
means.
that is not a position I've
So-
taken. The position I've taken is that you are attempting to maintain at once government should be transparent and at once people should have inherent privacy, which is somewhat
Those are two different
contradictory.
things. Those are two different things, man. Those are two different things.
Okay, so Don, would you say like your idea of transparency for government is like public channels where all votes are public, bills have to be like published, but
Definitely,
Snitzel would be
yes.
more like you're not required to give up private DMs to like the court or something like that. Is that about what you guys are thinking in terms of public versus private rights for citizens?
Personally, for your explanation of me, that I believe so. Yeah. Snitchel.
Sorry, could you reiterate that, Jukes?
So I'm still a little confused on your stance as how you would differentiate the members of the government's privacy rights versus those given like overall in the Bill of Rights proposed by Don here. Like what kind of transparency would you want to see in the government instead?
This is not something the Guild has yet taken a firm stance on, but overwhelmingly, we don't believe that there's. I would be of the inclination to say that the court can request any private conversation from anybody if they are suspected of some form of misdeed.
Okay. Would you agree with like the stuff Don outlined earlier that like bills have to be public and stuff like that, or do you have something else in mind for that?
Yeah, the Guild is, as we've said, in favor of a heavily regulated, a very powerful but heavily regulated, and that entails heavily self-regulated government. So public publicity is inherent to that.
Okay. Is there anything else you guys want to ask each other?
I did see Raymond Prince Party's statement. So he believes that you are saying, or Snetcher was saying, that if the members of the government are citizens, don't they have privacy rights, and therefore the government is not public? And if not, how does it ensure transparency? Is that correct?
Yes,
okay. So
that is approximately said. And
I suppose I should properly refute that instead of avoiding sidestepping it, I suppose. So if the members of the government are citizens, they want to have privacy rights, and therefore the government is not public. So as I said before, the government as an entity is separate from the citizens of citizens. So the government consists of citizens, yes, but the citizens as a whole are separate from the government as an entity. So it's pretty similar to how the American Bill of Rights works. So you have let me backtrack a bit. So we are giving these citizens privacy rights. The government is already ensured. We are already going to ensure transparency through, as I've said before, giving the Bill of Rights, making the bills public instead of being hidden in legislative chambers, and how do you say, making these legislative debates, and trying to make these bills passing through the parliament. Those debates should be public. Those debates should be viewable by the citizens. So I think that is what we mean that is what we mean in our manifesto when we want government transparency. So.
All right, thank you. Actually, someone in Twitch chat just asked another question. I was planning to do something along similar lines. So what is your guys' opinions on, let's say, two people colluding to, like, I don't know, pass a corrupt bill in DMs? Would you say a hypothetical court case would be allowed to view this, or should the privacy rights trump that?
Well, this goes back to the point I'd made that that the Guild and I personally maintain that any dealings between government officials upon a court request should be made public, because there is no legitimate reason why the dealings of the government and of government officials in their government capacities should ever be kept should ever be kept private rather from the citizen body or from their compatriots.
And Don, what's
Okay,
your opinion on the matter?
What I think is that what I think is that so yeah, I think yes, I agree with Sneto. It should be made public. So yeah, it's a government matter, so it should be made public, and yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, thank you for the responses. I would love to keep talking about this, but we should probably move on to the next question.
There's a question we missed as well from Nibagolsa, asking about how our respective parties intend on informing the citizen body of our decisions and what we do. To answer that from the Guild's perspective, the Guild puts out press releases of every major action we take, every change to our platform, every alliance, every piece of propaganda, everything of that sort. So we make everything we do and everything we deal in public available, and we are working on drafting a newspaper to provide information on the dealings of others as well.
I would also like to going back to the previous debate we had. So I actually misspoke. It was actually the right to privacy and protection against observation without consent. So I suppose that is my fault. And as for the question, I've already created a couple of updates, private updates. They have, I believe, one is already posted onto the Discord. It was about a week ago, and I plan to post one today. So I believe that they're pretty good to read, pretty easy to read, pretty catchy. So, and in addition to that, I do plan on starting my own little story. It's not related to my party, I guess, but it's consumable media. So.
Alright, sounds good. Both of you have nice plans to publish your dealings, but we should move on to question number 4. So, what are your thoughts on how Japan should approach relationships with city-states and other nations, especially in the context of the early game? So, Don, your turn to go first this time.
Excuse me. So, Japan should approach these relationships with city-states and other nations in a kind of neutral manner. I'm not expecting huge wars happening up on day one. I'm not expecting any of that shit. So what I am expecting is kind of neutral things, just like seeing how much we can how close our borders are, that sort of thing. Whether they will be friendly to us, whether they will be angry at us for whatever reason. So I think, especially in terms of the early game, I think we should approach things as neutral as possible. Definitely not going ahead to just warmonger everything. Definitely not that kind of stuff. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, what about you, Snitchell?
Well, the Guild's default position is absolutely one of peace and of alliance building. I think the ultimate diplomatic game for us would be one of peaceful hegemony. However, we will, within reason, respond to any attacks upon ourselves or allies or the environment in kind and forcefully so, if it be necessary.
What are your two thoughts about a hypothetical barbarian situation? I know this is quite common in DC, but let's say there's a barbarian camp just outside our borders, but they're not exactly threatening us quite yet. What would you do if you had power of the army in that situation?
I think
Snitchell, you can go for it. I'll go.
that's all right. You can go for it. All right, I'll go.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of that debate, and especially in its later stages, is impingent on whether we do barbarian clans or not. The Guild would absolutely be of the opinion that until any attack or threat has been made upon us, we are not to attack.
Okay, so my position would be that if we do not do barbarian clans, then it will only be a matter of time until they attack us. So my position is that if we do not do barbarian clans, that we should just wipe it out completely. In terms of if we do barbarian clans, I think that answer will have to wait until we do an internal debate as to what our party stance will be in the legislature. So.
All right, thank you.
Right. So,
do you have a crossfire question, Sincil?
Yeah. So, what exactly? So, is your policy just want to flat out wipe out any barbarian camps seen anywhere, or is there some margin of threat and proximity to our own settlements and to our own interests, where within you would decide that was justifiable?
Okay, you're misinterpreting me there. So, I assume this question is for if we're not gonna do barbarian clans. In that case, like I'm just gonna go. I'm in support of just going for a campaign of all out, just killing them all. It may seem a bit, attacky. It may seem a bit, savage, but I feel as though since they are going to attack us, they are going to attack our settlers, our civilians, then we should put our best step forward and we should just wipe them out everywhere, just everywhere. But that's only if we do not do the barbarian clans. If we do them, like I said before, we're just going to hold an internal debate as to our party stance.
Right. So I don't see where the misinterpretation is there. Is that an absolute policy? Like if there's a barbarian camp halfway across the world on an isolated island, would you intend to go and just wipe it out for the sake of wiping out barbarians because they could possibly attack us, or is there a margin of usefulness for that?
On top of
That's
that,
the question.
answer, how would you respond to a concerned Twitch viewer who calls this genocide?
Oh, it's pardon me, isn't it? Yeah, genocide. Okay, I see. So,
would you agree, or what are your thoughts on both of those questions?
Okay. So, in terms of Snetto's question, then, well, obviously it has to be within reason. If they're really close to us, then obviously, like, we're just gonna wipe them out. But if they're like halfway across the world, then no reason to just send over a bunch of units over there to just go for a meaningless upgrade. In terms of Perfect Wing's accusation that killing all barbarians is genocide, well, barbarians are not an ethnicity. Then they frankly are not. If we meet China in the game, if we meet America in the game, then that is an ethnicity. If we raise all the cities except for their capital, like start killing people that are Americans or Chinese, then I'd consider that a genocide. That will be something that I am strongly against. But barbarians are just roving clans of people that don't really have a place in our society. Of course, as I've reiterated before, this is only if we do not do the barbarian clans update thing. So yeah, that's it.
I feel like you may somewhat have latched on to the lesser part of the issue there. I'm inclined to think myself that the greater issue with killing loads and loads of people is not whether they happen to be of the same ethnicity, though of course that would be massively problematic, but you don't support that. It's the murdering many, many, many people upon questionable justification, which I would expect our chat member is objecting to.
Let's see. I mean, you're not really having the moral high ground here. If for example, if the barbarians attacked us, if the barbarians attacked the settler, the traveling settler that's going to settle to another city, and they actually capture it, what are they going to do? What are you going to do then?
I'm sorry, I don't see how this is a response, because you explicitly specified you intend on attacking them before they've done any such thing.
Yeah, let's keep in mind.
Oh, it's not.
The question was specifically, let's say there's a barb camp a few tiles outside of our settling city, but they haven't attacked us yet. What would your plan of action be?
Well, I've answered that already, haven't I?
Yeah, I know you have, but I think that's the specific situation we're talking about. So going off about, because I believe Snitchell has said once attacked, they won't hesitate to retaliate. But in this case, he's accusing you of attacking indiscriminately without being provoked first.
Oh, it's kind of obvious, isn't it? You got, as I've said before, like you gotta put your best step forward. You gotta, put them, you gotta attack them before they attack you. You get what I mean? That's why attack is best form of defense and all that kind of stuff. So, and then yeah, I mean, like I see no reason why I have to reiterate this.
Well, you're the one who circled back to the beginning of the conversation. Now we've come to the place where we were before, where Traffic Wig is concerned. As I interpret it, and it's my concern, is that you're attacking people who may or may not attack us. There's a possibility they won't attack us, and in which case you've
They're not
killed
going to be
many, many
innocent.
people.
They're eventually going to attack us. They're eventually going to attack us. Like you can't just be like, oh my God, there's barbarians there, and then we were just not going to attack them because we are peaceful. We have the moral high ground over all of these warmongering pro-war parties. Like they are eventually going to attack us. So why not just kill them off instead of just them becoming too strong and overwhelming our cities? Like, what's the point here? Like,
Well,
just
we
get them.
get them. We can put defensive units in place to intercept any attack, and at that point, the damage would be lesser to us, and we would avoid this danger.
Okay, I think we can put a cap on this question and settle it that the Green Party in Sinsel supports a much more defensive stance, will not attack unless provoked, while the Pirate Party is more proactive and would seek to eliminate potential threats. This is, of course, assuming that barbarians are automatically hostile. So let's move on to a question in chat. So to the participants, how much would you plan and develop administrative infrastructure such as ministries and secretaries, and what would you do specifically? And I think we'll start with Snitchell this time.
Right. Well, I suppose there's two questions here. We would be strongly in favor of developing them to whatever extent is feasible and avoids redundancy. In terms of specific infrastructures, that's a bit more complicated. That's a bit dependent on the eventual shape our nation and its situation takes. So there's not a tremendous amount I can go into there. There is infrastructure that needs to be put into place as to choosing policies, as to choosing sciences, that sort, which we would work on as soon as possible. Beyond that, it's all relatively situational. So we would have to get. I am in contact with diplomat person. The guild would publish anything we attempt to do there. So I will keep the populace updated.
Okay. My response to the Civ's diplomat question is that, well, this question actually shows my inexperience in Civilization 6. I only own Civilization 5, so frankly, I have not that much of a clue what ministries, secretaries, etc. they are. I do know that in well, Norgem actually did the all the Civ 6 stuff, all the minor Civ 6 stuff in the Maori.
Don, I
And
believe this is referring
as
to like
far
government ministries, not necessarily in-game stuff, like
oh
Department of Justice or something like that.
oh I see not much. Okay, my bad. I misunderstood the question. So in terms of administrative infrastructures, I guess we would be in support of that, but not to the extent that they will be held unaccountable, and not to the extent that the regular ordinary citizen they cannot they don't know what will be going on. So like if a newcomer comes in and then there's this ministry or secretary or whatever, and they just it's just bureaucracy for the sake of bureaucracy, then I don't think we would support that at all. But in other terms, I do believe that there are certain sectors that would be favorable. So certainly like a war secretary. So like someone who could like appoint general, someone who would be experienced in doing the matter. I suppose maybe a diplomatic sector that will be certainly viable. And we would support that. We would support that. I believe that our party would support that.
Okay, any crossfire questions from either of you?
None from me.
Looks like we can move on. I guess we do have a question from Norjam here. He asks, what are you going to do to support scientific research in-game? I guess we can start with Don this time.
Okay. So in terms of scientific research, we do like it. Yeah. I mean, like a science victory. I don't think we would support a science victory that much, if at all. But we do support scientific victory, scientific advancement. I think that having scientific advancements, having us even such a slight lead in scientific advancements, that will be beneficial to the country as a whole. Frankly, if these scientific advances are hindered by environmental quibblings, then I would be in support of the science. So that's my stance.
Right.
Again,
Well, the guild. Oh, sorry. I assume you were going to introduce me, so I'll just go ahead.
Yeah, just go ahead.
Yeah, the guild. In the early game, we do believe there are earlier priorities in terms of expansion, in terms of growing our population, in terms of establishing a firm material and economic and fiscal economy. However, we do have some measures in place for science, particularly in terms of religion, and in terms of the establishment of preserves, eventually zoos and aquariums, that sort of thing, to further boost the science income. But particularly, the thing that's going to come up first is in terms of religion. Jesuit education would be something we intend on pursuing for science purposes, in conjunction with Earth Goddess for further religious and, by extension, science purposes. So that's what we have in place now, obviously subject to change situation with that.
What are your opinions, specifically just Nissel, on rushing a wonder to get a great profit in the early game?
Again, it's largely dependent on how feasible it would be, on what we'd have to be sacrificing to do it. At this time, not necessarily for it, not necessarily opposed. Generally more for it than other parties would be by our nature as a religious party, but yeah, without knowing the exact detail yet, not going to commit either way on that front. We do definitely want, of course, a religion at some point, though, and we want to ensure that's secure.
And to the Pirate Party, it's kind of out of left field, but would you support Russian technologies to build a strong navy, or are you ambivalent on that?
I don't think we would actually. Well, of course, I guess we would support it kind of, but to an extent, definitely to an extent, because just simply having a large navy but just sacrificing other scientific advancements, that's a really poor way to do it. I think we will be fine if we have a large navy eventually, but if we have to, if I don't think we would support at all just rushing to have a large navy immediately. So it's more of a long-term thing. Definitely more of a long-term thing. So yeah, that's it.
All right. Any crossfire questions from the either of you?
Yeah. As to having a large navy is both a means and an end. I suppose we've not talked about what the means to the end would be, or what the end to this means would be. So what would that be? How would you go about building a navy eventually? What would be your preferred approach? Composition of that navy? And then what would that navy be for? Would it be for defending trade routes? Would it be for exploration? Would it be for attacking stuff?
Actually, this is before you answer, someone in Switch chat has asked a very similar question. They ask if you have a plan for the administration of the Navy, like a system of captains. Is its focus going to be defense or offense?
Okay, so in my opinion, as I've said, in our manifesto, where we've actually taken we've highlighted our affinity towards exploration. So definitely, like we want to explore with our navy. We want to explore other continents if they are available. We want to explore other civilizations that we can possibly trade towards. In terms of, you know, gaining how we are going to gain this large navy, then obviously we are going to have to resort to the materials of a time, whether they will be wood or metal or etc. So, and in terms of defense or offense, as I've said again, it will probably be in defense of trade routes, defense of the nation. But its advantage is actually that if we do get into an offensive war, then we will be able to use that navy to our offensive needs. So it will be mainly for defense, but it can also be used for offense. That is the advantage.
Okay, and building off of that, for both parties, what is your opinion on how the Army and Navy should be structured? Like, should it be in the hands of the Prime Minister? Should there be a formal military structure with generals, or should it be up to Parliament to pass everything? So I guess we'll start with initial, since Dawn has been going for a while.
Yeah, we'd personally be of the position to assign the Prime Minister de facto control, but to install some system whereby we've considered a number of systems. It could be by default delegated to the governor of the city or state that constructed that unit. That might change in times of war, times of peace. Not quite certain yet. We could also have a system of established generals. That is probably the preferred option at that time. We would want a number of generals elected from somewhere, probably elected, we would think. And yeah, control would fall back on the Prime Minister if the generals are, for whatever reason, indisposed, but aside from that, it would not go to the Prime Minister.
My response to that question would be, I do believe that generals and the military advisors will be of great help to the Prime Minister and his cabinet. But I do think that this position would have to be elected by Parliament because, just Parliament, just like. I mean, we know who could be a good meta general, probably Westcott or someone similar who has done similar wars. But yeah, I think that Parliament should be elected. Parliament should elect a general if they are given a chance. So, and I do see. Can I just interrupt you? I do see that Perfect Wing has asked a question to us about us rushing the technology for galleys. As a to Perfect Wing, this does show my inexperience in the game. I actually don't know what technology that we will be sacrificing in terms of the galley research rushing for galleys. I will have to ask 14 on that, but since galleys does, I think galleys would feel like to be kind of a lower level tech than perhaps something like nuclear submarines. Then probably yes. I'm not too sure on that. I'm not going to force that.
Okay,
Right.
and for
So, yeah, if I might
go
address
ahead, go ahead.
Right. So the Guild's policy with regard to the environment is one of development. This is founded very much in our theology, which will be made public soon. Working on that. The idea is our divine mission is to nurture and grow the environment. It's not necessarily to preserve it as it is. It's to make it better, and by that to make ourselves better. And so, for example, we would focus on extracting resources sustainably. We would focus on improving drastically. We would focus on some amount of forestation and deforestation where it's to the benefit of the environment. Preserves are, of course, an excellent way of doing this sort of thing.
And to build off of that, someone in chat has asked what you necessarily meant by religious geoengineers. Apparently you commented that earlier, so if you would mind expanding upon what you meant by that.
That is the question I thought I was answering, actually.
Your answer's
Yeah,
nice.
what that means is we intend on developing and growing the environment, not just preserving it as it is.
Okay. As long as nobody else has any crossfire questions or any in chat, I think we can probably move on. Hold on, we do have a question here. Can you provide examples of how your theology would impact a decision to chop, mine, or clean tiles?
Yes. So, in general, we are opposed to the permanent destruction of natural features. This especially applies to natural resources. We have some legislative bills in the works for this. The general gist of them is, within some reason, we oppose the destruction of anything. We are for mining resources. That's sustainable. It won't result in the destruction of that resource. It benefits us. It benefits the world. It's something we're very much in favor of. That's kind of the core to our economic game, actually, which is focused on improving mechanically in game, improving environmental tiles.
So if I would like to have a crossfire, please. So what I'm understanding that you will be in favor of mining certain forestation resources, even though if they would destruct the environmental issues that you propose, you are in support of.
Sorry, at least on my end, you cut out for a moment there. Do you mind repeating that?
So, like you said you will be in support of mining tiles because if the product in question that you mine for is of benefit to the nation and to the world, and you would be in support of that even though it would destroy the natural wildlife around it. Is that what you're trying to say here?
Let's say like the coal tile or whatever. Would you still support
Yeah.
mining coal despite its negative effects, even if it's not actual in-game on the environment?
Now we come into the issue of my not. I'm in the same position with Don here as of never having played Civ 6, so that's something I delegate to my resident Civ 6 experts in the game, the exact detail of that. As for resources like coal, whose use damages the environment, that's something that we're of the opinion has to sort of be evolved. We don't think it really makes sense to go into the Stone Age thinking we shouldn't mine coal, that's going to cause climate change. As that becomes apparent, we would likely begin to oppose it. For the time being, we can't, in the interest of good RP, oppose that.
I see.
But we do, I believe Don mentioned something about hurting the wildlife around that mine. We do absolutely oppose anything that causes destruction with no benefit, and without replacing that destruction. So in terms of mining, we would want to definitely practice clean, safe, sustainable mining practices.
Okay, thank you for your comments. I think we should probably move on to question number 5. What are your two's thoughts on implementing official economic systems such as currency, housing, and districts, and especially housing. I'm quite interested in hearing what your thoughts on that are. We can go ahead with Don this time.
In terms of official economic systems, well, we've seen an economic system in Mode 5, we've seen an economic system in Mode 7. Well, and they were frankly both kind of viable in a sense. Mode 5 obviously was really controversial, split the community in many splinters. Mode 7 a little bit more accepted, but perhaps that was only given by the fact that it was a multi-civ, not really a it's sort of separated from the rest of the civilizations. But as of right now, I'm kind of neutral on it. Not for or against. Perhaps not really against anything that will be seen similar to decorp. But perhaps more of perhaps a system that would rely less on votes and sort of thing. In terms of currency, well, it's the same thing basically. Currency, like, yes, same thing basically. Housing, in terms of housing, I do remember that someone had pushed forward for a housing bill or something similar. I guess I would be in support of that. I'll actually have to discuss this with my party members, party associates, in order to garner an actual response. But yeah, in terms of housing, we did have that system in Mark 5. I guess well, it's a similar system, and I guess it kind of worked, but I'm not too sure. Districts, not really that much of opinion on that. So
Maybe I can clarify this question a bit. Would you support, on basically a range from 0 to 10, how much of free movement between territories and states for voters would you support? So, like, can a voter move from state 1 to state 2 easily, or do they have to, like, buy a house, go through regulatory laws, and all of that first?
I see. So thank you for clearing that up. So in my opinion, I think if the voter wants to move to another state, then they should be able to move to another state. But obviously, if it's like, a week before an election or like during the election so that they could vote twice, then obviously not that sort of thing. But if they do want to move somewhere to another state, I mean, they're free to go for it. Like,
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Snitchel, on this entire question.
So the Guild is generally in favor of the establishment of these systems. From a meta perspective, they're incredibly interesting. From an in-game perspective, from an RP perspective, they foster economic growth. However, by virtue of our, relative to the real world, quite small community size, they are incredibly dangerous. They offer tremendous potential for exploitability and for the corruption of the government. So we would, should they be implemented, we would be strongly in favor of the establishment of strong government intervention and regulatory bodies to keep them in check and to ensure they continue to serve the common good.
okay. Give me 1 second to choose. I'll have to go for a second.
Okay, in the meantime, so Snitchel, would you support, or like what kind of laws would you support to limit the voters moving from one state to another?
Well, I think this somewhat goes without saying, but no moving between states during a vote, and no moving between states during the voting period, because that poses some obvious exploitability issues. Beyond that, we're of a roughly similar position to the Pirate Party and Dawn. Generally, so long as there would have to be some restrictions, but moving between states, particularly in connection with the housing bill, which would impose a natural limitation on that, we think should be allowed.
What is your opinion on, let's say, vote buying? I know there hasn't been any evidence of this happening yet, but I'm not sure if you're around for Mark 5, but D-Corp started selling votes in exchange for money. Would you pass a law to oppose this, or are you, like, what's your opinion on it?
This is something we would absolutely and very strongly oppose. We really don't think money has any place in just governance. yeah, that's something we're absolutely against.
What other economic incentives do you think there are for, let's say, an economy to run off? So if you can't buy votes, what else do you think people would be incentives to buy?
Well, this is where we run into a substantial issue with which the combined minds of Mach 7 in the end failed to resolve. Housing is a very interesting way of backing a currency, and that's for that meta reason something we're inclined to support. Beyond that, I personally am of the opinion that it is perhaps viable to have a prestige economy run entirely by people wanting to have money, so long as we have a regular injection of that money into the economy so as to foster its exchange. However, I'm not necessarily devoted enough to that to stake the Mark 8 economy on it. So that is something which Decent as a whole and the Guild of Green will have to further confer on, because that's I've only been around for Mach 7, but that's always been the main issue with an economy, so we're not going to resolve it with tremendous ease.
All right, and question from Twitch chat here. What is your opinion on taxing and government involvement in the housing market in general? Would you let it like develop on its own, or would you implement strict regulatory frameworks?
Well, as per every housing bill I've seen, the government would have to have some role in building and possibly selling those houses. Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's also impingent on whether we want housing to be tradable or whether it's something just bought from the state and then returned to the state or sold back to the state when you leave. There are a lot more variables in that question than could necessarily be outlined here, but by virtue of that, we're really not sure. It's very much up in the air.
What is your take on the potential for districts to be abused almost by parties throwing their entire weight behind a single state to influence elections, and what would you do to combat that?
Well, just in terms of parties established in support groups in particular states to control those particular states, that's not something I inherently oppose. I think that would actually be rather interesting, although especially since the harm that could inflict is limited because states are, at least as per the current constitution, subservient to parliament ultimately. As it stands, that's not something I oppose. In terms of gerrymandering, that's something we absolutely do think measures need to be taken against. That's where such obvious things as not allowing people to switch states mid-vote occur, and that's where other issues do also come up.
So you would support a federal bill to prevent states from, let's say, discriminating housing based on political party?
Yes, that is the sort of thing we would. Yeah, yes, in short.
That's pretty much all I have. As for my questions, I mean, Don's not quite back yet. Until Twitch chat comes up with any more, do you have anything else you would like to expand upon? Basically, from any question, doesn't really matter.
Well, I think there is one thing worth stressing, because this is an issue that's come up quite a few times. The guild is, as Diplomat said, we're religious geoengineers. We're not the conventional Green Party. That's something I would like to stress, that we're not the conventional preservationist Green Party. We've seen that happen, most of us. It's kind of been done, so this is something new, and that's just a misconception I'd like to clear up. Aside from that, I've not really got anything at the moment.
I just noticed Norja made a comment. Would you like to expand upon your ideas for elected generals? Like, why do you think that's a good idea and stuff?
Something of a misunderstanding. I meant elected by Parliament as opposed to appointed by the PM. Although directly democratically elected generals would certainly be interesting, so it's not something we're necessarily going to rule out. However, as at least the most prominent example of democratically elected generals I can think of, ancient Athens demonstrated, it comes with a lot of issues. So it's not something we'd be behind at this moment.
Alright, I guess we can probably just wait a minute or two more, see if anyone has questions. Hopefully Don comes back. I'll try to think of more. But if that's all you have to say, I guess we're more or less done until he comes back. Let's see. Oh yeah, what are your opinions on the Zaibatsu Corporation? Are you planning on making a coalition? Or you don't necessarily have to reveal that if you don't want to, but basically what is the Green Party's stance on this new and frankly scary party in this new political scene?
Well, I think in order to answer that adequately, I'd have to answer it from a meta perspective and from a self-interested perspective. From a meta perspective, it's very interesting. It's scary in that it's entirely possible it could result in a swift end to the buck if they ever achieved a majority, just by virtue of their size, not necessarily by virtue of their morals. But it's still tremendously interesting, and I think it will promote some very interesting political dynamics. From a self-interested perspective, they're a party who oppose a lot of our aims. They're a very significant force. We will be looking to establish a voting bulwark against their influence.
Can you maybe name some issues you have found common ground with the other parties on with respect to forming a coalition? Because I'm sure you're not going to form like a wide range coalition almost. I'm sure it's only a few issues that you're really interested in keeping a certain way, if that makes sense.
Well, on that ground, I'm not entirely sure. I think this is something which perhaps the greatest influence of Zaibatsu is that it's drawn together a lot of the very disparate parties around what little ground they do share, and just the ground that we oppose them and we don't want them necessarily to get whatever they want. So yeah, exactly what form any coalition would take, uncertain at this stage. Anything is possible at the minute, as things are before any of the lines have been drawn.
Alright, sounds good. It does look like Don is unfortunately not going to make the rest of the debate. Thankfully, we did get through all 5 questions and some more. I'm going to wait
I
about a
take his
minute.
absence as a forfeit, so I win, even though this is not a competition. I win this conversation. Yay.
Maybe the court of public opinion will side with you, but for now I'm going to give it about a
No,
minute
no.
to see if
This
Twitch
is
has any
going to be a
questions.
tyranny of public opinion.
It does look like everyone's pretty much out of questions. So, thank you for coming on the debate. It was fun. I'm glad we had the opportunity to expand upon both of your platforms. So yeah. Thanks everyone for coming to watch the stream as well.
And thank you very much for hosting.